So, Jeremy Nieuwburger. Meneer Muller en Gert. This one, and we have our other guest, he's Dutch, Frans Verhagen, journalist, publicist, and expert on the United States, writing for several publications, editor of a website, America.nl. And, well, let's sit down. And before I give the word to you, I'll open with some questions. We can't see you, but we're still with many. Before we get to the fascinating figure of Morton Downey and politics and television in the United States, something about the three of you, about the makers. Well, the first thing that springs to mind is that you made this film as a collective. And it's a clear statement that there are three directors, three credits. So I would think if I would be Morton Downey, I would say what a communist baloney to make a documentary with three people. So how did it work? What's the division between the jobs?
I'll start. Well, first off, after people see our film, when they see us come out here, they think we're going to throw chairs at each other. And I just want to make sure, we made the film, we don't act like that. We're a three-headed director team. We've done a couple films together. An earlier film called The Linguists, another called The New Recruits, and we're also really old friends. I think Dan and I went to Jewish sleepaway camp together, and him and Seth were interns together. So I don't know, we just get along. As a matter of fact, we're all staying in a single room in a hotel about 2 blocks away.
So you're still friends, and you're all from Jersey,
I also want to thank you guys for coming out to see this. I don't think Morton Downey Jr. would ever have imagined playing in this theater. And also thank you for having a couch that can accommodate all three of us. No, Seth and I are from New Jersey, and Jeremy's from Long Island, both suburbs of New York.
And is it true that you visited the Downey Show as a teenager?
No, those were all our friends.
Okay.
Who visited the Downey Show. We were never able to get rides there. We were all a little younger, so we couldn't drive at the time. But those were our friends who were lucky enough to go.
What age were you at the end of the 80s?
I guess it was 15 or 16, around there.
You knew already about the show then? Or?
Yes, we were watching.
And it was famous among friends? Or?
Yeah, it was the first show of its kind. It was taped. It was on late at night, so 11:30 or so. And if you couldn't watch it, it was on weeknights, it would be taped, and you'd gather around with all your friends, mostly male, and watch it the next day, and talk about it, imitate it, the issues really made you think about issues that were going on in politics and society at the time.
Okay. And Frans, maybe you're the oldest one in this company. By the way, I have to apologize for this image here with 5 middle-aged males, 3 of them bad eyesight. But Frans, you were living in the States at the time.
I was old enough to be a foreign correspondent when Ronald Reagan was the president between 80 and 89, and I actually never saw the program. I heard about it, and we all knew about the Tawana Brawley scandal and Al Sharpton. I think the political influence of the program at the time was minimal. You can also see it from the guest list. It's not exactly the top of the bill. Pat Buchanan was a struggling journalist at the time. He still is. So I think, we were talking about this before, I think it had a big influence on the way talk radio, and I'd like to hear you about this. Talk radio is still functioning today, but maybe not on television anymore. At the time, I think the influence was maybe limited to Jersey and New York. What do you think of the influence on the talk radio nowadays?
Yeah, talk has been sort of commodified for a long time in the United States. People during colonial times were going to pay money to hear people talk in coffee shops. This sort of political talk that existed just before Downey was mainly the domain of old men playing cards around coffee tables at the local luncheonette. The Downey Show really expanded that kind of talk to include guys like us. It was, as you saw in the film, it was created by the founder of MTV, and it was really targeting the MTV generation. And that has only ballooned since then. And today, outlets like Fox News are, the demographics are huge for young people and males. So that was an enormous influence of that.
And a lot of the players that were on the stage, even if they were B players then, this was sort of spring training for them. I mean, Al Sharpton is now the host of a primetime TV show on MSNBC, one of the major cable networks in America. A lot of them, this is where they were sort of learning their trade before launching their careers.
Talking about Al Sharpton, he's not in the film. I guess you tried very hard to get him in, but he didn't want to look back on the Tawana Brawley case?
Well, unfortunately, the timing of our film coincided with his launch of a new TV show, so I think his image is a little different now than it was then, and maybe he wants to keep it that way. But it was hard not to include him in the footage, clearly, because this is where I think the three of us learned who Al Sharpton was.
Right. We like to say that our film is the only media opportunity that Al Sharpton has turned down.
Can I ask you something? You got 3 Jewish boys in New Jersey, mostly liberal probably at that time. How did you like that show?
I don't think at that time my politics had sort of formed. And
You disliked the show?
well, you know what? Sometimes I would disagree with him, but he would have issues that in my social studies classes I was talking about. This was a much cooler way to learn about him.
Yeah, I think that as one person in the movie says, he presents issues as black and white. In the States we have wrestling, professional wrestling, which is like a sort of an imagined, fight between good versus evil. They dress up in costumes and that kind of thing. And then when issues are presented in that similar way, it's very appealing to a young demographic to imagine that there's a hero and a villain and to think about issues that way.
But is it in the end just as irrelevant as professional wrestling?
Well, it makes you think about, it's a way to engage intellectually as a young person with television for the first time. I mean, as you also saw, the talk television was not geared towards, it was more like sort of domestic issues or talking about, how to cook something or how to raise your kids or, meant for sort of stay-at-home moms and that kind of thing. So this was the first time we could sort of think about politics and a lot of cultural issues too, abortion, capital punishment that were affecting people, but nobody was really talking about on TV.
Okay. I would like to ask something about Downey himself. What do you think were his real motivations? Because there's a lot to do about being a blue-collar king, and in a serious interview he says he offers a platform to the people who aren't heard by the government. So he's a voice for the working class discontent. Is that all true, or was it just all self-promotion and this was a vehicle to attain that goal?
Yeah, after thinking about this guy, for 4 years or so, talking to everybody who we could get our hands on who knew him from family members, it's still really hard to answer that question. Certainly, one of the strongest motivators for him was to be famous. Everyone agrees on that, and to say whatever it takes. It's likely. We learned that he was sort of pro-life, anti-abortion in real life. So there'd be shows where he's really, his conviction is, we're fairly certain it's sincere. And when he's blasting the Kennedys, we don't know where that's coming from.
Right. I also think that at a certain point it doesn't matter whether it's a spokesman for the common man, whether it's actually a right-winged, whether you believed in these causes. At a certain point, as Kurt Vonnegut says, the author, you are who you pretend to be. Or Sally Jesse says in our film, if you stand out and say you're a tree long enough, you get leaves. Eventually, it doesn't matter what your motivations are. You are that. And he was a spokesman for people to air out their views on these issues.
And they believed him.
Right. And they believed him.
Yeah. And I also wondered, was there a lot of discussion between the three of you about the amount of psychology in the film? Because it's clearly that you think he's motivated by a competition with his father and to be as famous as his father. His whole life he wanted to be a singer, a crooner like his father was. was there discussion between the?
Yeah, you know, the sort of storyline that involves Morton Downey's father, it came about organically after we were interviewing the various subjects. No matter who we spoke with, that was one of the key things they would tell us, that he had issues with his father, that he was trying to be like his father. So it wasn't much of a discussion as much of a how do we best represent it. And you know, the animation that we used, I think, kind of follows that story the closest. You know, without either Downey living, we needed some sort of visual kind of enhancement to show you that clash between his father and he. But yeah, there was no debate. It's just sort of what we were told from everyone who worked or knew him.
I had a weird experience during the film. First, it was kind of scary, and then it gets like it's actually kind of silly, and in the end, you think, well, it's just a show; it's irrelevant. How did you guys experience that while you were making it?
Yeah, that's the sort of the chart of our movie. And that's really sort of the path that the show took. At first it was new and really exciting and in your face, and then it became sort of scary and had consequences. I mean, he was taking a sort of this sort of extreme right-wing path at times. By embracing the Tawana Brawley case, he was actually doing things that really hurt people. And then it became just silly, and then it disappeared. And then the question is, what is the legacy? And that's really the path that the arc of the film as well.
Rush Limbaugh, the talk show radio host, and the other AM stations that are now influencing right-wing politics, they have a direct link with him?
Well, you know, Rush Limbaugh replaced him on television directly. When Morton Downey left, they plopped Rush Limbaugh in there, and his shows, that's where the genesis of that is from. In our sort of thinking and discussion, we think this was a precursor to that type of talk. A lot of those guys have done it consistently for, you know, a long time, so they've taken it to the next level. But it's hard not to watch the talking heads on American news, 24-hour news, and not see bits and pieces of this, and not see that this helped sort of shape the way the discussion is presented.
Did he influence the level, the civility of the discussion in the United States? Rush Limbaugh could say last year, when a woman complained that there was no contraceptives funded under Obamacare, Limbaugh called her a slut,
right.
a whore. He got away with it. I mean, people don't care. Is this the kind of level of discussion that he started?
Some people care. I mean, you can't say that
Yeah, no,
people
that's
don't
true.
care.
Well, General Motors withdrew its advertising for about a month.
Yeah, my wife was disgusted, and as was I. I mean, I think the thing with Morton Downey and that type of demagogue on television is it actually is entertainment that pulls in people. We're an example. We were young people watching it, so we got pulled in. And then when it knocks about in the worst way, there are people that will then say, oh, this is terrible and I can't watch this, and there will those that, well, they support it. But it exists, and it's something that, good or bad what they're saying, it keeps this conversation going. So we saw some benefit to this type of show, even though sometimes it crosses boundaries that are despicable. There is a benefit to having a discussion.
Because people are getting engaged by it.
Right. I also think it's a direct lineage to Rush Limbaugh's slut comment, just because Morton Downey made it possible to say anything. Right? He broke down the walls, and whereas people wouldn't necessarily point to a direct lineage, once you break down the walls, then it becomes possible to engage in the lowest level of discourse.
I would like one more question before we go to the audience. That, in the present situation, you see that most of those outspoken TV hosts, like we have Bill O'Reilly on Fox and Glenn Beck still active, they're all right-wing populists. How come? Why are there no left-wing populists?
You know what? I think there's left-wing populists. Actually, Seth watches a lot of that on TV, so he can tell you about them specifically.
I'm the lefty of the group.
And why don't we know them here then?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I don't know if there's an answer, but it's certainly something that we've been talking about. Why does the right seem to be so much more successful at doing this? It sort of seems like I think they have a better story to tell to people in the United States. To people in the United States, the American story is like the greatest story of all time. The rugged individualism, that push out west, the whole
pioneer
and the
stuff.
right, nothing comes out of their mouths that's not wrapped in that flag, in that packaging. Everything is wrapped around that. And the left in our country, it's very like wishy-washy, you know. They're saying, well, with healthcare, let's look at what Holland is doing, and and that's not grabbing people in the same. It does grab people, but not in the same way. I think
Their
that has a lot
one-liners
to
are
do.
not as good as the right wing.
Yeah.
We'll wait until there's a Republican president again, and maybe the left will have their
Okay.
shot.
We'll give the mic to. Okay.
Hi, could you talk a bit more about the animation strategy? I was impressed with it. I think in the beginning I was a little put off, but as the movie went on and I could kind of see what you were doing with it, I thought it worked very, very well. But did you guys have discussions about that?
Yeah, the animation was a kernel of an idea that developed towards the beginning of the process, and we wanted the feel and the look of it to reflect the animation of the 80s, like heavy metal, or Pink Floyd's The Wall, which gets even closer to kind of capture that feel of the time. And just by Googling, animations, we found this brilliant animator from South Africa who lives in London, and we worked with him for many months to capture these sort of dreamy, trippy, rock and roll moments in a style that befits the time period. So there was a lot of discussions about it.
Yeah, I also think that the Mort story and the audience he drew sort of draws on this like good versus evil, this cartoonish representation of the world, as somebody would take in a comic book. So we thought that as a way to represent the inside of Mort's mind and the effect he's having was sort of worthwhile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He has very explicit recht opinions. Was he appreciated from the recht side of America? And other question is the Fox News, the program of Fox News, is not a heritage of him.
I don't know how was he appreciated. He was appreciated by like millions of teenagers. That's who he was appreciated by when he was on the air. The heritage question is very difficult. It's very difficult to really connect, to find someone who's on the air at Fox News today who says, I was a fan of Downey and I got into this because of Morton Downey and that's what I wanted to do. I think the main difference between Downey's act and the current act is Downey was expressing a very conservative right-wing view. The people doing it today are also expressing a very conservative right-wing view, but they are able to sort of coalesce people around that view and actually have an impact on policy, on government policy. That's a pretty clear evolution in our minds.
You know what's cool about Morton Downey also that I think versus the Fox News characters in Rush Limbaugh is Mort would surround himself with people, and some of them would argue with him, and you'd see the other opinion, and he was brave enough to embrace and face that. The Fox News network and Rush Limbaugh, they operate in sort of a bubble where they give a monologue for a few hours about their positions. It's a more cowardly way of having that discussion, I think.
But then it's a sad conclusion that this approach is more influential in a political way than his approach.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes.
So it's,
Well,
I think it's more influential because it's become so much more pervasive.
and
Now,
more sophisticated, maybe.
more sophisticated, and you have a whole network dedicated to it. This is a show that was, in syndication, which means playing nationally for just a year, before it left New York, or expanded beyond New York. So I think that this kind of talk, because it's so much more out there everywhere, that it has a lot more power.
Other questions?
I was wondering if you talked to Laurie or Kim, or if any of them seen it or didn't want to comment.
Yeah, we spoke. He had 4 wives. The first wife, he was married to her before he sort of got interested in the media. So we didn't approach the first wife. It wasn't relevant to the story. The second wife I spoke to, she didn't want to participate, but her daughter Kelly is the interview that we did do. Kim was very ill and still is for the duration of this project, and her husband said that she couldn't be on TV, she couldn't do this interview. And Laurie, this is where it gets a little prickly. We spoke to her, we had lovely conversations with her. We told her from the beginning what the project was going to be. We didn't skirt around the warts and all approach, and she sees her husband in a different way. And if we included her, this would have been a very different film. I don't think it would have worked so well. It wouldn't have been an honest look at the man. It would have been maybe an inside look. So we sort of agreed to disagree. She hasn't seen the film yet. It's being released in early 2013, and we'll probably approach her to try and set up a screening.
How did his daughter react to it? The daughter of Mort was in the film.
Yeah.
How did she react to it? Did she see it?
Yeah, she loves it. So, yeah, she was really excited about it. All his friends and family who are in the film are like, think we portrayed him accurately. Jury's out on what Laurie will say, but.
She also, Kelly provided us with a lot of great footage, home video, as did Lloyd, his entourage. A lot of just, Lloyd may have been waiting for our call, because when we found him, he was ready to confess to his wrongdoings, give us archival footage of his relationship. I think that was a turning point for the project when we found Lloyd.
Other people?
Can I ask a question? Yep. If there are no questions from the audience. Yep. I was thinking about the comment you made about the left wing not having this kind of talk radio. It's only partly true, because I know Pacific Radio in San Francisco, for example, has the same kind of stuff, but from the left. The other thing I was wondering about is why would... I think there might be a reason, or I suggest maybe a reason why this is a right-wing thing, because these people are more frustrated. They're more disappointed with American life, and so they have to shout about how good it is, and they vote in people into office that actually don't make them any better, so they keep shouting. Is this sort of a safety valve for American society to get it off their chest, and so things can go on without any serious change?
Yeah, there's certainly left-wing media, but I don't think that that's sort of the story. I think it's minimal. It doesn't have the same impact. The story is Fox News is awesome because it's finally delivering the conservative view that has been left out, or Fox News is horrible because it's lies and propaganda. That's really the story. And again, I think it's you may be onto something. I mean, left-wing talk tends to be more funny. You have like the Stephen Colbert or Jon Stewart, and so maybe people on the left are more into sort of, if I don't laugh, I'll cry. And people, there's some scientific studies that say that the right brain mind has a greater fear response. But I don't know how much weight to put on that.
But I do think that, as they say in the movie, anger and fear and creating a victim or creating an enemy, brings in ratings and brings in an audience. People like to see a fight. The question with Downey and others is how long can this fight, how long can you sustain this level of anger? Before...
In Downey's case, not very long.
No,
so.
not very. Soon it becomes a parody of itself. Yeah. What these other sort of talk shows have is they kind of address these topical issues in a way that allows them to sort of feed on themselves and keep going and going and going. In some cases, in other cases like Glenn Beck, he also didn't last. He lasted as long as Downey did, exactly, almost to the month. As much of a huge impression as somebody like Glenn Beck made, he was only on the air for 2 years. So it's like, sometimes people just get tired of it.
One question to close the session. I think that in your work this seems to be a bit off topic because your first two films were very internationally oriented, with The Linguist about two American professors looking for languages that are threatened to be extinct. Thank you. The Linguist, the first film was about this languages that are maybe extinct, and new recruits, about entrepreneurs in the third world. And this is so very American, this topic, and I think now you're working on a film on global climate change. Yeah. So why this topic, and would it be these international films is more what Ironbound is all about, or?
We wanted to, you ask three directors, you get three different answers, I guess. One thing is we wanted to make a film that was more personal, and I know this might not immediately strike you as a personal film. But the 80s in the United States, at least, was a very strange and intense time. And it definitely, one of the hallmarks of the era was going from polite to not polite publicly. And that's something that we wanted to look back on and to think about how that influenced us. We were all fans of the show. Why is that? And then we all ended up in media ourselves. Why is that? And this represented an opportunity for us to do something a little different. But we also like films where there are very strong characters that have the potential to go into larger issues. And this film, I think, does fit the bill.
We also were three people, as we've been discussing. So if we can't bring at least the creativity of three different people to our work, then we're sort of failing ourselves. And we're very conscious of, what our work is, and we consider it art. And our hope is that every time we launch a project into the world, it sort of expresses a different part of us. And we're trying to create films as we move along, and we've got 2 more films in the works that are completely different, so we're not bored with ourselves.
I just have to say something to prove that you'll get 3 different answers.
Okay.
Just quickly, this is like a local story, but it's also, the populist is sort of the populist entertainer, or the demagogue is a global, international phenomenon. One who motivates masses, probably in every culture. Again, somebody in the film describes every culture is a pyramid with the people on the bottom angry and need a voice for that anger. And I think this is what you saw, by us, and this exists around the world, I think, throughout time, and will continue to exist. So it is a global story too.
Okay. And when will the change will be premiered? When?
The name changed. It's now The Anthropologist, and that will be coming out sometime in 2014. That we're in post-production on right now.
Okay. Maybe a world premiere on IDFA.
Right.
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
for seeing it.
Yeah.